Hey, it's Chandler Collins, and thanks for joining me. And guess what? It's science time. We're going to go over all this. It may look a little bit daunting right now, but I think it's really going to be a benefit to you. So hang in there with me. I'm going to walk you through it step by step. And we're going to talk about exercise and exercise intensity. So you've probably all heard the term aerobics, and some of you may have even heard the term anaerobic, and you may not really know what those words mean. Basically, aerobic, this term right here, means with oxygen. And all anaerobic means is without oxygen. So you've heard people talk about things like they're going to an aerobics class, or it was an aerobic effort, or maybe you've heard that it was an anaerobic effort. And basically what we're talking about is workout intensity, right? So at low levels of intensity, what we do is we produce energy aerobically, meaning with oxygen. We use oxygen to produce energy, and when our workout intensity increases, there gets to be a point where the amount of energy that our bodies can produce with oxygen just reaches a limit. And so it has to start producing energy in other ways. It starts producing energy chemically. And that's anaerobic energy, or anaerobic energy production. And at all times, even as I'm standing here, you sitting there watching this video, at all times you're somewhere on this spectrum of low to high, workout intensity. If you're sitting, it's obviously low, but you're also on a spectrum of aerobic to anaerobic energy production. At all times, there's some portion of your energy that's being produced anaerobically, and some proportion of your energy that's produced aerobically. And so the lower the intensity, the more it's produced aerobically. The higher the intensity, the more anaerobic comes in. But there's never a point at which aerobic goes away, and vice versa. There's never a point really where anaerobic goes away. There's always a little bit of each at some point. So how we look at that and why that's important is because knowing where those thresholds are, knowing where the points are where anaerobic energy really kicks in versus when you're producing aerobic energy can be really valuable, not only in helping you enhance performance, if that's your goal, but also your long-term health. And the reason for that is that anaerobic energy production is stressful. It's stressful on your body. We get that intuitively that when we work out harder, a higher intensity effort, it just feels harder, so it's more stressful on our bodies. Well, there are lots of ways in which a workout can become anaerobic or be more stressful on our bodies, and so knowing where these thresholds are and how this all interacts can be really useful. So anyway, so we've got aerobic and anaerobic energy production, but how do we measure that? Well, essentially, we measure something that's called lactic acid or lactate, and this is a byproduct of anaerobic energy production. So anaerobic energy produces lactic acid, right? So the more we're producing energy anaerobically, the more lactic acid we produce. So as our workout intensity goes up, so does our amount of lactic acid. And so as that goes up, the amount of lactate we produce also goes up. So if we have a duration of effort, an exercise, for example, and we're slowly increasing our intensity, what will happen is the amount of lactic acid we produce will also go up as our workout intensity increases. Okay? So at a baseline, like if you're just sitting in your chair, you produce some amount of lactic acid, some amount of lactate, as it's also called. And so that's what we call your baseline level of lactic acid. And then at some point, as your workout intensity goes up, the amount of lactate starts to increase. A good way to think about it is like the amount of lactate you have in your body is like if you had a bathtub and you had the water on at a really kind of slow level, maybe a slow drip, and you didn't have a plug in the drain. So you turn the water on in the tub and it starts to drip out into the tub, and the drain just takes it and it just immediately goes down the drain. There's no standing water in the tub. There's no low level of it. That's your baseline level. That's just like your baseline level of lactic acid because your body's always producing it and it's always clearing it. So at a low level of intensity, you have a small amount of lactic acid. And so as your workout intensity increases, it's like taking the faucet and turning the water up just a little bit. And you can imagine if you didn't have a plug in the tub and you turn the water up a little bit, there would be some point at which the water was coming out of the faucet fast enough that water started to accumulate in the tub. The drain was still draining it, right? It was sort of keeping up with it, but a little bit would start to accumulate. That is our aerobic threshold. It's what we call the aerobic threshold. That's the point at which you go above baseline, right? So the point at which this line just starts to creep up because our amount of lactic acid is going up, where that starts to creep up is our aerobic threshold. And that's going to be important for us later. So if we increase our workout intensity, if we sort of increase the amount of water flowing into the tub, we're increasing the amount of lactic acid being produced in our bodies. If we increase our workout intensity, there would also get to be a point where the drain could no longer handle the amount of water coming into the tub. More water would come into the tub than is flowing out, and the level in the tub would start to rise, even though you don't have a plug-in. If the water's coming out fast enough, the level in the tub will start to rise. It can only drain so fast, and you're pouring water into the tub faster than the drain can handle. That's exactly what's happening in your body with lactic acid as your workout intensity increases. So lactic acid starts to accumulate in your body, and your body can't clear it fast enough. So as our workout intensity goes up, this lactic acid point starts to rise. That point at which the intensity gets high enough that lactic acid starts to accumulate, meaning the tub keeps rising, that is our anaerobic threshold. Okay? And so we have an aerobic threshold where lactic acid goes up above baseline, meaning what you would produce just sitting in your chair or lying down. And we have the anaerobic threshold, which is that workout intensity where lactic acid really starts to accumulate in earnest when we can't clear it fast enough. So why is this important? Well, because anaerobic energy production is stressful, that makes anaerobic workouts stressful. And so anaerobic workouts are any sort of workout intensity that gets you up to here. And that could be, for some of you, that might be sprinting on a bicycle. For some of you, that could be fast walking, and that's okay. But knowing where that intensity is or understanding that that happens teaches you why controlling workout intensity is so important. And it's particularly important when we're under stress in our lives. So emotional stress, structural stress, if you're sitting or standing all day or doing a lot of physical work, definitely chemical stress if you're fighting a virus or a bacteria or anything of that nature. All of these things are very similar to, actually if not identical in terms of their effect on our bodies, to anaerobic energy production that we do during exercise. They all cause this, right? They all cause an increase in other hormones like cortisol that affect how we're producing energy and its ultimate effect on our body. So if you just remember that anaerobic energy production is stressful, then that will make a lot of sense and you'll understand why your intensity is so important. So when we work out, really we want to choose an intensity for most of our workouts, especially for the cardiovascular exercises. For cardiovascular exercises, we want a workout intensity that's really right about here, just below where this point is, which for most of you is going to be slower or a lower intensity than probably what you're used to. But the nice thing is if you work out here, if you're really steady at it, you work out just below that level, then you train yourself at that level and you start to really build what's called your aerobic capacity. Okay? If you're competing, if you're somebody who likes to train for events and get faster, you've probably heard people say, well, we're going to do an anaerobic threshold workout or a lactate threshold workout. This is what they're talking about. They're wanting you to work out right below this level or right at that level. For those of you who train, this area in here, the workout intensities in between here and here are sort of like a no man's land, right? You're not really effectively training either your aerobic or your anaerobic threshold. You're sort of in a no man's land that's not helpful. If you're training, you want to train either here at a lower intensity, and that's what our general exercise, we're just exercising for health, that's where we want to be. And if you're training for an event, occasionally, much less than most of you would think, occasionally you want to train here, but still you want to train in this level for the majority of your time because it's lower stress. It also takes longer to develop your aerobic threshold. Your aerobic capacity takes longer to develop than does your anaerobic capacity. Your anaerobic capacity you can train in weeks, honestly. Your aerobic capacity takes years. And so for those of you who've been training here all the time or in this area, you really haven't been training this as effectively as you could be. And so you can make a lot of gains in this area. So that's sort of the overall view. If you understand this, then looking at other things like what exercises you choose, the exercise intensity you choose and how you monitor exercise intensity through things like heart rate or just perceived exertion, meaning how hard do I feel like I'm working out. There are techniques to handle those things that, or techniques to measure those things that allow you to gauge where you are in the spectrum that are really helpful. And also things like power meters. If you're a cyclist, using a power meter, a cyclist can also be a way to help you get some data to figure out where you are. So knowing those things will really help you long term. It'll keep your intensity low, it'll keep your injury rate low, it'll keep your sickness rate low. It's interesting to note that for athletes who are training for something like, or actually competing in really stressful events, say like the Tour de France, which is a 3-week bicycle race in France, the amount of stress they're under is really high. They're constantly pushing the limit up in here in this anaerobic range, and because it's so stressful, because we're having so much of this production that's stressful on our bodies, it makes people break down much faster. So the rate of injury and sickness due to working out at this level is much higher than if you're here, down in this lower aerobic range. So again, this is just sort of like a science break. It's some basic knowledge that will really help you when you're thinking about workout intensities and when you're trying to plan and structure your own exercise routine. You don't have to know all the details of the science, but if you just get the concept that I want to be more aerobic most of the time and stay away from anaerobic most of the time, with the caveat that if you're training, you want strategic insertions of anaerobic efforts. If you understand that, then your ability to have a long period of time of injury and sickness-free training goes way up. And your ability to make progress, get better, and stay healthy is so much more enhanced. So I hope that's helpful. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a comment below. I'd love to hear what you think. I'd love to hear if anything wasn't clear or if you'd like to hear more about a particular topic. Thanks for joining me, and I'll talk to you soon.